Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I'm Herb, I'm an alcoholic. Welcome for the final workshop in the series of 3. The first, well, I'll get to that in a minute. My sobriety date is February 21st, 1984. The Roundup is 25 years old, and I've been sober 25 years and attending every one of them except the first one, because as a newly sober person, I didn't know anything and I didn't know what was going on around me. But as soon as I did, I came here for the same reasons that you're here. It's just a wonderful experience of fellowship and information and inspiration. So I'm so glad that you're here at the Roundup and participating in the workshop this afternoon. Please join me in the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I've introduced myself as an alcoholic. How many other alcoholics do we have here? Okay, a good 2/3 of the room. And how many are not in AA but are in another 12-step fellowship? Oh, that's wonderful, about 1/3 of the room. Excellent, excellent. I say that because it's my understanding of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that Bill wrote it specifically for alcoholics, but in the paragraph that introduces the book, the preface to the first edition, he concludes one of the paragraphs by saying, and our way of living may have its advantages for all human beings. Not just people in AA, not just people in Al-Anon, but certainly all people in all 12-step fellowships, and my personal experience is all people. Anybody who's on a spiritual path can benefit from the path of the 12 steps, because what it is, and I like the pun that's intended, it's distilled spirituality. Oh yeah. Because Hinduism and Buddhism and Judaism and Christianity and Islam are all wonderful religious traditions. And each one of them was put together by somebody who was trying to find power. And of course they named it differently. Brahman, Buddha, Yahweh, Christ, Trinity, Islam, Allah, yeah. So thank you. I might need help every once in a while. And the words don't count. As I reviewed in step 2, any word we use is wrong. Inherently wrong. That's why Bill Wilson and the magic bullet of AA said, choose your own concept. The word G-O-D is a symbol for that which cannot be named. It's a symbol. It is not the reality. The G-O-D word, in fact, is only 600 or 700 years old. It's a translation of the Latin Deus, which is a translation of the Greek Theos, which is a translation of the Greek Zeus. Everybody trying to name it And I like the word it with a capital I. Yeah. Frank Priest, many of you knew when he was alive. He was just a wonderful example of leading the principles of this program, died at around 45 years of sobriety. He said there are two sides to Alcoholics Anonymous. One side is the spiritual side, and the other side is the outside. See, it's all spiritual. If in fact you've had an experience in the first step, my prayer for you is that you've come through an experience or will have an experience of a sense of doom and hopelessness and powerlessness and complete lostness. Getting ready for this? Doesn't sound like much fun, does it? But that's the foundation. That's the foundation of having a bottom, whatever your bottom is, and the elevator goes down from the top to the bottom. The very bottom is death. Hopefully, you avoid that. You have already so far. So the bottom is death, but you can come from the bottom if you survive your bottom, and you can come out of that pit of powerlessness through the steps to the pinnacle of power. We come out of no power, walking these steps, which I used to think was a straight line like that, and I found now it's a spiral, all right? And Bill Wilson suggested that the purpose of the steps is the deflation of the ego at depth. The deflation of the ego at depth. And it becomes a process. The spiritual path is, in fact, a process of consolation and desolation, consolation and desolation, consolation and desolation. Now notice, those are words that come out of the vocabulary of the 16th century mystical experiences of John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila. Consolation and desolation. Consolation when I'm feeling good. Desolation when I'm not feeling good. All right? But notice the path here. This desolation is higher than this consolation. And this is our spiritual path. We want this wave-like motion. We want this undulation in our life. It doesn't feel good. Everybody is here in this room because they like to feel good. And now, thank you. And now, the biggest line here is Starbucks. Absolutely. We like to feel good, and now immediate gratification is our mantra. All right? And it's okay. And it's okay. But when we don't feel good, we try to find something that makes us feel good. 3/4 of us here in this room used alcohol and drugs, and the other quarter used something to deal with us. All right, but the line of best fit here is if you're on a spiritual path, my phrase, gently pressed up against it. If you're on a spiritual path, gently pressed up against it, then you will in fact grow so that your oscillation here, your desolation here, is higher than your consolation here. This is the line that most of us would like to avoid. What's that line? The flat line, the death line, the sheet over the face line. Thank you, I'll wait. Jesus, I love you, but you can wait. Right? All right. So, I was taken through a process of the steps. I reviewed that in my first session. I won't review it now. But it showed me that steps 1 through 3 are a relationship with God. Steps 4 through 7 are our relationship with ourself. Steps 8 and 9 are a relationship with other people. And 10 through 12 is our way of life. This is what we've gathered here today to do, is to talk about my experience with steps 10, 11, and 12. And I'll get beyond the area that we talked about before. But the first part of this is on step 1, of course. It's the foundation. We're broken in our body, we're broken in our mind, and we're broken in our will, and we're powerless. That's the conclusion. In my 1-year workshop, we meet once a week for a full year. We spend 4 to 5 months on the first step. Yeah, 4 to 5 months on the first step, because if you don't have that foundation, you're not going to do the balance of the work of making a decision for power, making a decision to surrender to that power, and then doing all the work of analyzing what are the obstacles to the power that's deep down inside of us, and then confessing what the resentments are and the fears are and the inappropriate sex is and the secrets and the dishonesty and the guilt and the shame, and oh my, oh my, oh my. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. And we analyze it to see our character defects that come out of that, the exact nature of our wrongs, and we list them, and then we pray for their removal because we're powerless, and we pray the prayer, my Creator, because we need to be recreated. And we then take a look at our relationships with other people and how we've diminished them and how we've harmed them, and we make a change so that we don't continue to harm them, and we try to repair the damage by going to each one and telling them what we think we did, asking them what they think we did, and asking for the suggestion as to how to repair that damage. And it's a process of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not an event, it's a process. I have a meditation over there that you're welcome to take. I didn't hand it out because you might not be interested in it, but there's a meditation, 3, 4, 5 page that I prepared for a retreat that I did about 10 years ago, and it encompasses all the dynamics of the principle and the process of forgiveness. Look it up in the dictionary. Forgiveness is not to condone or approve or any of the other words I have there. Forgiveness, in fact, is not a decision to not retaliate, to exact revenge or seek compensation or judge. It's a decision to forgive. It's not an event, it's a process. It's a decision to release. It's a decision to release them. The goal of the 12 steps is to find power, and the result product of the 12 steps is to find freedom. Freedom from the bondage of self. This is what the book says. I'm a big book fundamentalist, a literalist. The work that I do is not magical, except in its results. The process is not magical at all. I read this book, and I do what it says. When it says to pray, I pray. When it says to reflect on a question, I reflect. When it says to write on a question, I write. When it says to read, I read. When it says to discuss, I discuss. Those are the 5 moving parts of doing this work with a sponsor or a step guide. If you haven't done that, and I'm talking about a method and a structure of going through the book 1 page at a time, 1 step at a time, taking your time and being guided by a person who themselves have been guided through the big book instructions. These are not, to me, self-revealing instructions. I was 5 years sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a graduate education in theology, philosophy, and psychology. All 3 of them, and I read English. I could not figure this out on my own. But I didn't know that I didn't know, and I couldn't see that I didn't see. Until grace entered my life, and willingness was the key, and between grace and willingness, the alchemy of the spiritual awakening was precipitated. Spiritual awakening, a change in the way I think, a change in the way I feel, a change in the way I behave, and here's the key. It's done to me, not by me. This is not about self-help. This is not a self-help book. This is a book for people who are helpless and hopeless and powerless and have a sense of doom and frustration and despair. And that's the point of the first step. And then it leads us out of that pit, up those stairs, up those steps, to power. And it, the process, and it, the power, changes us. Most of the time we don't even know we're being changed. Read Appendix 2 in the back of the book. It's so subtle, it's so slow, it's so imperceptible. We show up, we do the work. And then when we're finished with the 9th step, at least this is my experience. I know the book says halfway through. That's not my experience. My experience is I was finished with my 9th step in 1988, 5 years sober. I looked over my shoulder and I said, wow, look at me. I'm no longer restless, irritable, and discontent. I have a sense of ease and comfort. How did that happen? And I began to understand this process. I went through it again in 1991 with a different man, and I had a different experience with several of the steps. And I went through the work again in 1994. Hear the pattern. About every 3 or 4 years, I went through the work with a different man. That man wasn't my sponsor, never became my sponsor. I have a sponsor. His name is Lloyd. He's been my sponsor for 25 years and will continue to be as long as we're alive and sober. He will be my sponsor. I love that man. So mature, humble, common sense, power of a model for me, and a great sounding board for accountability. I still, 25 years later, call him 3 times a week, and we have a conversation of transparency. How am I thinking and feeling and acting? Most especially, how am I acting? And he holds himself accountable to me these days. But you have to hear what I said. I went through these steps with a man who wasn't my sponsor. I call him a step guide. And in 1994, this man said, Herb, you have a lot of information and you have a lot of experience. It hasn't done you a lot of good. That's the kind of person you want to connect with. The person who's going to not worry about your feelings and is going to tell you the truth. That's the person I want to be connected to. Absolutely. Make me uncomfortable. I have come to comfort the disturbed, but most especially to disturb the comfortable. Yeah, you've heard it. That's right. That's right. And he pointed out several lines in the big book. I'll only point out one on page 58. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, can you let go absolutely? I knew it wasn't a trick question. We're not into trick questions. I said, no, I absolutely cannot let go absolutely. He said, that is correct. Therefore, I'm asking you to construct a prayer that the Spirit that you're seeking enter into your heart and your mind and free you, detach you from that which you hold so dearly, what you know and what you feel and what you think and what you've experienced. Are you willing to let go? Are you willing to set aside in order to be taken to a place that you don't even know exists? Whoa. Yeah, I'm willing for a new experience. And he gave me the set-aside prayer. Hopefully you have a handout that has that. If not, in some intentional way, join us in the set-aside prayer. It's on the back of my card. After we're through, you're welcome to get my card for my contact information. But on the back of the card is the set-aside prayer. At least it's one version of the set-aside prayer. There are several versions. It doesn't matter. The words are not important. It's the intention that's important. I want to, and so my current set-aside prayer, when I begin my morning meditation practice, my current set-aside prayer is, Holy Spirit, enter my mind and my heart and free me from up to now and detach me from after now and allow me to be fully engaged in the now. Pretty straightforward. All right? The set-aside prayer, please join me. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path, and you for an open mind and a new experience of myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path, and especially you. I mentioned that the three parts of the human being are our body, our mind, and our will. I've mentioned it in the prior two workshops, maybe not as explicitly in this workshop. Body, mind, and will. This model of approaching the steps helps me understand how the steps work. I divide step 1 into these three parts. I'm powerless in my body. When I take a drink, I drink more than I intended. I'm powerless in my mind. When I stop, I don't stay stopped, and I don't even remember thinking or feeling anything about my reason for stopping. I just start again. No matter what the consequences, and I never learn from the consequences of my behavior. I am a mental defective. But most especially, my life is unmanageable, and at 10 years sober, when I was given that set-aside prayer, this man took me into unmanageability and showed me what the big book has to say on page 52, the bedevilments. If you haven't read that paragraph, read it and personalize it. And the exact nature of the spiritual malady on page 62, selfishness, self-centeredness, and that we're powerless to remove it. And in fact, the book says we're even powerless to reduce it much by wishing or trying on our own power. I see a very nice parallel between the way the human being is constructed and the way that Alcoholics Anonymous is constructed, because we have 12 traditions that underlie the principles of unity. The principles are the 12 traditions that underlie the concept of service, the unity, which is the fellowship. Now, you can get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. Some of us need inpatient or outpatient professional help. The majority of people get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. You can get sober in the fellowship. And then you can recover if you do the steps. We have 12 principles that underlie recovery. Those are called the steps. And then the third part of the triangle is the service, and the 12 principles are the concepts. So we have 12 principles that underlie recovery, approved in 1939 when the book was published, 12 principles that guide the fellowship, and those were approved in 1950, 12 principles that were approved in 1955. The concepts of service tells us how to run a spiritual and nonprofit organization. Brilliant. Bill Wilson was incredibly brilliant, all right? But let's take a look at what does that mean. A triangle has a very nice broad base. In fact, it's there's some word for it in geometry, and I forget. They're all sides are equal. Equilateral triangle. There you go. So not any one side is more important than the other. But without a very strong foundation, what do we have if we just do step 1 or go to meetings and are of service? And we haven't, in fact, experienced the process of recovery through the 12 steps. Does that look like a triangle that will last in hard times? No, like it'll just fall over in hard times. I think that's a brilliant illustration. It was given to me by another presenter of the purpose for doing these 12 steps, the deflation of the ego at depth. Now, it is interesting. Bill Wilson had lots of people trying to help him, and he was very open to all the professional help that he could get. He had a psychiatrist named Dr. Thibault. And Thibault said, you got it right. He wasn't an alcoholic, but he studied the process. He studied Alcoholics Anonymous. He studied the book and the steps, and he studied alcoholics. And he says, you got it right, Bill. The 12 steps are the tool for the deflation of the ego at depth. But it's my experience that the ego has an uncanny way of regenerating itself. The ego regenerates itself. This is the purpose of the 10th step, because it addresses the regeneration of the ego. Oh, I didn't realize I had that there. There we go. The 10th step says, we commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. It begins on page 84. After the promises are listed, I won't read them since you are very familiar with the promises, and if you're not, read them on page 83 and 84. Wonderful material for meditation and gratitude. And it says, are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Here's the key line. They will always materialize if we work for them. This thought brings us to step 10. I'm quoting. This thought, that we work for them, brings us to step 10. In the 12 and 12, the 12 and 12 was written in the mid-40s, in the mid-40s, in articles in the Grapevine, and finally published in 1952 as a combination about the steps and about the traditions. Bill Wilson really wanted to get information about the traditions out to the fellowship, but the fellowship was bored with the traditions. They said, we don't want those damn traditions. We don't need any regulations. We don't need any laws. And Bill said, they're not regulations or laws, they're guidelines. He said, there are only two disciplines in Alcoholics Anonymous. There are only two disciplines in Alcoholics Anonymous. One is alcohol, and the other is God. And you're either going for one or you're going for the other. My favorite mental image of the spiritual path is a dimmer switch. Not a light switch, that's a spiritual experience. Mystical, magical, powerful event. Spiritual awakening is very subtle, imperceptible, starts at a very low voltage dimmer switch, but with a click it goes up and the lights get brighter. And with a click it goes up and the lights get brighter. And with a click it goes up and the lights get brighter. And over time, and we don't even know the lights are on or getting brighter, pretty soon we can see more. And the good news is we can see more. And the bad news is we can see more. More will be revealed, and a good friend of mine says, and it's never good news. So he says they will always materialize if we work for them. Well, I was talking about the 12 and 12. So Bill wrote the 12 and 12 as a commentary on the steps to package it with the tradition so that he would sell the book. A book on the traditions would not sell. A book on the steps would. He's a salesman. He's an entrepreneur. He's a marketing genius. So he combines the steps and the traditions, and the book sells. But this is a commentary on his experience. It's not instructions on how to work the steps. I personally don't understand how anybody can work the steps out of the 12 and 12. I love the 12 and 12. It's a wonderful commentary. There are some exceptions. Probably steps 7 and 11 have a little more grist for the mill in terms of some concrete recommendations as to how to work those steps. But the rest of it is just a glorious commentary by Bill Wilson on his experience and observations and analysis. Wonderful supplement to the work of the Big Book. But in my experience, and I've read most of the literature of most of the fellowships, wonderful literature. Every fellowship has wonderful, that I've been exposed to, has wonderful literature. The Al-Anon literature is stacked with wonderful questions, piercing questions, soul-searching questions, great questions. But I've never yet found literature that has the explicit instructions as to how to work the steps as the Big Book does. So in the 12 and 12, going back to that, Bill Wilson calls step 10 a spot check inventory. A spot check inventory. In fact, he captures the reason for it. He says, it's a spiritual axiom. Whenever we are disturbed, there is something wrong with us. Now, I don't know about you, but I hate that. I so much want it to be your fault. But they don't qualify it. It's a spiritual axiom. Whenever I am disturbed, there is something wrong with me. When we enter into the 10th step, once again, going back to the model of the triangle, body, mind, and will, what does it mean to be recovered? The big book on the very face page, at the beginning of the book says how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. What does that mean? We're not in recovery. We're not recovering. No, not if you've worked the steps and had the grace of God free you from alcohol in your body and alcohol in your mind. And until that time, there's nothing that you can do about it. You're powerless and just totally hopeless. That's what it means. No, you can't go to meetings and get sober. No, you can't work the steps and get sober. No, you can't pray and get sober. No, you cannot have a sponsor and read the book and be of service and get sober. Well, that sounds like a heresy. I've just ripped it all down. Well, because those are just the moving parts that get us to God. You see, if there's any one thing that I can do, I'm not powerless. I have to completely have a meltdown, a complete implosion with an experience of powerlessness, and then with the desperation of a drowning person, reach out for that flimsy reed. And that reaching out itself is a grace, but the reaching out is my willingness, and it's the cooperation of grace and willingness, that alchemy that I referred to, that creates recovery. So what I think the book means, and this is my interpretation, is that once we stop drinking and we're not possessed by the obsession and the delusion to continue drinking, once we've been given the grace of being freed from alcohol, we have recovered. But the 10th step says very clearly in the next page, and I'll get to it in a minute, is that we're never cured. We're never cured. Our will is corrupt, inherently flawed, defective. My will on its own power will choose me. When I am disturbed, there is something wrong with me. I'm never cured. I have a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. What does that mean? I have recovered, but I'm never cured. First half of the first step about alcohol. Second half of the first step about unmanageability. Unmanageability has nothing to do with alcohol once we've been given the grace to have the freedom from it. And so the big book suggests here, this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living, the title of the whole workshop, as we cleaned up the past. All right, what does that... See, Bill does not use words loosely. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. The minute somebody with me, I'm their sponsor or step guide, finishes their 8th step and they're ready to launch on their 9th step, but they haven't begun their 9th step, I give them the 10th step instructions, and then the 11th step instructions, and then the 12th step instructions. We begin this way of life of living as we cleaned up the past. As we begin doing the 9th step, we need as much power as possible to do the 9th step. And so we keep the channel clear. My image, I love mental images. My image of a human being is as a conduit pipe, a water pipe, for instance. And the water pipe is filled with sludge. That's resentment and fear and dishonesty and secrets and inappropriate sex and guilt and shame. All that stuff from the 4th and 5th step. That's the sludge. And the 4th and 5th step are the roto-rooter that cleans out the sludge. All right? And the confession and the 6th and 7th step and then the 8th and 9th step. Cleaning out that sludge. Well, that's what the 10th step asks us to do. Keep the pipe clean. so that in fact we can have a transparent relationship with that power deep down inside of us, that power deep down inside of us can shine up inside of us and eventually out through us to others and provide light on the path for other people. Mental image. I'm a lantern that shines the light of my experience on the path that I have walked so that others can walk this path with dignity and have their own experience. I'll talk about sponsorship at the end of today's session. We have entered the world of the Spirit. 10th step says we have entered the world of the Spirit. My goodness, what does that mean? Where the hell have we been? If we're only now entering the world of the Spirit. We've been in the world of self. Steps 4 through 9 are all about the world of self, how I damaged me and how I damaged other people. We have now entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Understanding in our mind and effectiveness with our will, the two things that make us specifically human. This model works through all of the steps, the overall steps, and each one of the steps. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for a lifetime. All right, now he gives us specific instructions. My instructions were to read this material on 84 and 85 and to highlight it, and then to read the material in step 10 in the 12 and 12, and then come back and outline this. This material is very outlineable. If you haven't done that, I suggest this is a powerhouse, these 2 pages. Powerhouse of a tool that we can wear like our cell phone on our hip. And Bill Wilson calls it a spot check inventory. See, the 10th step, there's a lot of misinformation about the 10th step. My take on it. The 10th step is not to be done in writing. It takes too long. The 10th step is not to be done at night. The 10th step is to be done immediately. When I am disturbed, stop, pause, pray. Where am I disturbed? And I'll find that I'm in fear and resentment and dishonesty and selfishness. Where did we see those before? In the 4th step, the mother of all inventories. All right? This is the theme of the 4th step. And we continue, it says, to do inventory. We continue like when we're disturbed, we take inventory. What's the source of the inventory? Continue to watch. Our job is to watch. Watch for when we're disturbed. If we're awake, we will know that we're disturbed. If we're not awake, we will be asleep and disturbed and not know that we're disturbed. Yeah. Or exactly, we're just disturbed. Or we don't know, we're just agitated. And as soon as we are, of course, we agitate those around us, of course. But, and I heard this said by another person, we're asleep dreaming that we're awake. This is about waking up. 12th step says, having had a spiritual awakening. This is about waking up. We're asleep, dreaming that we're awake, and when we get disturbed, if we're just a slightly bit awake, we can pause and ask, what's the source of being disturbed? Because it's my problem, not them. It's never them. Oh my God, I hate it. But it's never them. It's always me, because it's my filter. See, Chuck C. has it right on his book. I have copies over there. A New Pair of Glasses. If I have pink glasses on, you're going to be pink. If I have blue glasses on, you're going to be blue. But I won't know you're blue and I won't know you're pink because it's the only set of lenses that I have. And my filter for all reality comes through those lenses. And what I need is clear lenses. And I can't do that. I'm powerless. But God can come in. He's the magical optometrist, optician, I guess. And he gives us, it gives us a new pair of glasses, a new lens through which we perceive reality. The conduit has been cleaned out and we have become transparent. And when some flotsam and jetsam comes into our system, it disturbs the equilibrium of the system, and we stop and we say, so, Oh, I'm in a little financial insecurity right now. Right now. I don't wait to do it in writing. I don't wait to nighttime. Spot check inventory. All right. It says when these crop up. Notice, it doesn't say if. We're human beings. We're going to hit the speed bumps of life at all times. I don't care how spiritual one becomes. We never transcend our humanity. So what does he say to do? Pray because we're powerless. Discuss because we're self-deceitful. Amend because we continually harm other people. And then turn our thoughts to helping somebody else. If in fact, you all have to look up now. If you're not looking up, you all have to look up. If in fact, the nature of the disease is self-centeredness, the nature of the antidote is other-centeredness. I don't think it's any accident in the gesture that the first step in the other-centeredness is to other with a capital O. And the second step is to other with a small o. 11th and 12th step, the spiritual coin, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So the final recommendation to get rid of resentment in the resentment inventory was to pray and turn your thoughts to somebody else. In fear, pray, turn your thoughts to somebody else. In sex, pray, turn your thoughts to somebody else. In the 10th step, he just recaps that. Notice he says, when these crop up, we ask God at once. It doesn't say we wait till the nighttime. It doesn't say we wait till we put it in writing. No, right now, when I become aware that I'm disturbed, it's an immediate spot check inventory. God, please remove this disturbance, this fear, this resentment, this impatience. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Notice it doesn't actually say we help anybody. No, it's brilliant. It anticipates The Secret and the Law of Attraction, if you're familiar with the DVD and the book. All right? Because so you think, so you are. How you think is what you attract in your life. I believe that. I don't believe some of the other stuff that they talk about in both of those exposures, but because it becomes too materialistic. Turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Because eventually, if in fact we're thinking about helping somebody, eventually we will have the opportunity to help somebody. It doesn't say, call your sponsor. It just says, talk to somebody about it, because we're self-deceitful. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. By this time, sanity will have returned. Lots of ignorance about sanity and insanity in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, at least. And you hear it all the time. Oh, I'm just insane. I'm just an alcoholic. I just have an alcoholic mind or an alcoholic personality. No. You're unrecovered, you're immature, and you're irresponsible. Yes. All right? And you're ignorant. Because if you understand what the big book says, and there's lots of technical jargon in the big book, lots of technical jargon. Words are used here that you wouldn't find defined in a dictionary. But they are defined here. On page 37, he defines insanity. When just after Jim put a little whiskey in his milk. It says, whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. See, it comes from the Latin word sanus, S-A-N-U-S, which means health. And when you put an I-N in front of it, it means not healthy. That's all it means. It has nothing to do with psychiatry or psychology or mental illness. Nothing. It has everything to do with the obsession to drink. The obsession, an idea that is so subversive that it takes possession of us without our consciousness and without our permission. An obsession, an idea that takes possession of us without our consciousness and without our permission. Insanity, and he defines it, a lack of proportion, a lack of the ability to think straight. It just means we're mental defectives. But it does mean we're mental defectives. Our mind does not work like other normal people. Our body does not successfully process alcohol, but our mind does not successfully process reality. Well, it's my experience, not just with alcohol too. Yeah, and not just in early recovery either. That's right. So sanity returns, he's saying here, because he's saying you are freed now from the obsession. Grace, nothing that you did, nothing that I did, nothing that we did. Grace. Grace is equivalent for me is God, is the life of God, the energy of God, the force of God, the source of God. Whatever it is, grace is that gift that's free, gratuitous, meaning that we didn't earn it, a gift that we didn't earn, and that's always present to us. In step 2, I really made the point. There is no place that there is not God. God is deep down inside of me. God is all around me. God is immaterial. God is infinite. God is present and can't be absent, and God can't change. The nature of God, I believe, is love. Love is a verb. Love is action, according to Chuck C., and I really love that theology. All right? God is always pressed up against me. God is always present, pressed up against me, but respects my freedom of will. I can say no, or I can say yes. And I have to come to a place where I know that I am powerless on my own power to even say yes, and I have to be willing to receive the grace of yes. I took it into meditation, this conundrum, this puzzle, this question. Which comes first, grace or willingness? And the words came to me. I was taken to a place of willingness. Hear the grace. I was taken to a place of willingness. But I was willing to be taken. Grace and willingness. It didn't explain how it worked, but it poetically gave me a sense of comfort. That there is some mysterious, completely not understandable interaction between grace and willingness. And Bill builds his step process on that cornerstone in the second step and said willingness is the key. Now, the man who took me through the work is a real hard ass, and he said, willingness is great, Herb, but action is imperative. He said, willingness without action is fantasy. Oh, cold and cruel. Willingness without action is fantasy, all right? We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. How much effort is that? No thought or effort, it just comes. That is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. Hear that. Grace. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And in the prior page, he talks about reacting to the hot flame, retracting, rather than when we were in step 1 in our disease, putting our hand on the hot flame, not remembering that it burned us yesterday and the day before and last week and last year, and we've never learned from our experience because that's the nature of the disease. I don't understand it, but I do observe it. It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. Now, that's an interesting phrase, and it's been interpreted and misinterpreted. What's a laurel? Ask yourself. If we're resting on a laurel, what's a laurel? No, it's not our butt. No, in the Greek and Roman history, they gave a wreath as a crown, a wreath of laurel leaves as the symbol of the winning person in a contest. They got this wreath of laurel leaves. And so it was their accomplishment. In the light of that, it is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our past efforts. Yeah. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. I believe that the unmanageability, the spiritual malady, is the cancer of the soul, and it's the least understood and the least treated in Alcoholics Anonymous. A cancer of the soul. We are never cured, it says. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we have is a daily reprieve. We can't go to 7 meetings in a row and just say, okay, now my battery's charged, I can skip meetings for a week. I'm not supporting going to meetings every day, or even 7 a week, or even 1 a week. Work that out with your sponsor. I used to think that meetings were the key. When anybody would relapse, I would go ask them, so when did you stop going to meetings? And then when I did this step work at 5 years of sobriety, I thought, oh, the steps are the key. Because anybody who works the steps will have a spiritual awakening. So then I would ask people about, did they really work the steps, and did they confess everything, or did they hold a secret in the 5th step, and did they finish their 9th step? Those are the key questions around doing the steps. But now I have a completely different attitude. All of that is still true, what I just said, but it's not the pivotal point. The pivotal point for me, currently, tomorrow it might be different, but today, the pivotal point is sponsorship. Do you have a sponsor? Because if you have a sponsor who is experienced and cares enough about you to tell you the truth and not worry about hurting your feelings, you will go to meetings, and you will work the steps, and it'll all fall in place. So currently, I see that as the most important. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Well, what does that mean? Spiritual condition. Now he's going to define this on page 85 in the big book. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. Now I'm going to ask a question, and then I'm going to reread it, but I want you to engage with me here. Whose will? Whose vision? Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. God's will, my vision. My vision of God's will. How can I best serve thee is in quotes. It's a prayer. Thy will, not mine, be done. You see, my responsibility is to create a vision of God's will for me today. They call it meditation. We'll get there in just a minute. A vision of God's will for me, and then to use my will to align my will and behavior with the vision as it's been given to me. So it works like this. If I were to leave from New York to London on an airplane, I know a little bit about flying, very little, but I know that the pilot flies the plane only about 20-25% of the time between New York and London. Because when he sets his sights from New York to London, he sets an electronic device in the plane called a homeostatic device. I'm sure there's much more technical terms for it, but stay with me. So he sets this electronic device that says, bingo, I want to go to London. Does he stay on course? Heavens no. The plane is made up of moving parts, and some of those moving parts have it veer off. But because he's already got an electronic signal, it corrects it. And then the wind comes up, and the rain comes up, and then the electronic parts, and he's always off course. The pilot is always off course, but he has set an automatic pilot, he's connected to the electronic device here and the electronic device there, and they correct, automatically self-correct the plane so that it gets to London, which was the original goal. We set our vision of God's will for us today. We envision that vision. And then with our will, we say, thy will. That's our homeostatic device. And we're always off course. And you know how we know we're off course? We're disturbed. And when we're disturbed, we realize there's something wrong with us. And so we pray and we discuss and we amend and we think of other people. And then what happens? We have this experience. We have this experience in the 12 and 12. It elaborates this. We experience courtesy, justice, kindness, and love. I'm asked all the time, how do I know what God's will is? I'm asked all the time, how do I know what God's will is? It's not a trick question and it's not a trick answer. If you're experiencing this, you're in self-will. If you're experiencing this, you're in God's will. If I had a tree up here with oranges on it, you would know that it's an orange tree. By your fruits, you will know. By your fruits, you will know. If you're experiencing being disturbed, you're in self-will. I won't qualify it, because this is the truth. If you're in ease, a sense of ease and comfort, and you're experiencing courtesy, justice, kindness, and love, the majority of the time, you're pretty much in God's will. This is how it works. And so, what we have here, it says, every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will, that's my vision, into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will be done, not mine. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. Our mind has been restored to sanity. It is no longer obsessed or subject to possession by our obsession. And so, once again, going with mind and will as the two things that make us specifically human, our mind has been restored to sanity. It's able to think about what is God's will for me today, and our will has been restored to its proper use to align my will with God's will. I heard a speaker say, we have an internal GPS using our current technology, God positioning system. I love acronyms like that because it just cuts right through it, doesn't it? All right? We set the vision when we set out on the journey for the day, and we're always off course. But if we have the proper vision and the proper attitude and the proper consciousness, we arrive at the end of the day pretty much in harmony with the laws of the universe, and therefore have had a sense of ease and comfort and a pretty good day. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. All knowledge and power. Genesis, the Hebrew scripture says, God made humans in God's image and likeness. He made them male and female. That's interesting. The image and likeness of God is male and female. All right? The image and the likeness. The image that we have the power of to know. And the likeness we have the power to do, to make a decision, to take action. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. Sixth sense. We know what 5 senses are. Sixth sense must be intuition, like the fourth dimension. We know what 3 dimensions are. length, breadth, and height. Fourth dimension, that must be not what we've experienced in the material world. That must be the spiritual dimension. We have to think about the words that Bill Wilson uses and what does he mean. It takes us to a place of a new consciousness. But we must go further, and that means more action. Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. Once again, Bill Wilson does not use words loosely. So he says prayer and meditation. What do we mean by the difference between prayer and meditation? Prayer is when I'm talking to God. And meditation is when I'm listening to God. Now, let me challenge this. First of all, that's absolutely right from my standpoint in terms of the big book understanding of meditation. So we have emotional sobriety through doing the steps, especially the 10th step. Physical sobriety by the time we get to the 10th step. Emotional sobriety by the time we live the 10th step. And now we're brought to our way of life, as I mentioned before, which is a spiritual coin having two sides. The side of relationship with God, other with a capital O. This is in your handout if you have one. I have some more handouts from another kind of session, which will have some of these handouts in it. You're welcome to take that. It'll be the essential handouts will be there, not all of them. And the 12th step is other-centeredness with a small o. I see that as a spiritual coin. You've never seen a coin with one side. It's always got two sides. What I'm going to do is give you an overview of prayer and meditation, take a look at the big book instructions, talk about my practice and my experience. Sorry to walk back and forth. Next time I'm going to have a little more high tech here and be able to do it remotely. Okay. But he says prayer and meditation, he makes a distinction. Prayer is when we're talking to God. Meditation is when we're listening to God. Do we listen to God in our ears? A lot of times they'll put straitjackets on those people. Yeah, okay, psychotic break, people listen to and hear God talking, all right? Now, I'm not dismissing it. I'm saying it's just not my experience. I hear God all the time when I get quiet and I listen to my thinking. I listen to my thinking. We shouldn't be shy on the matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. Key words, proper attitude. First step, humility, and work at it. My spiritual director says, all people on a spiritual path, could we close the door, please? All people on a spiritual path have a spiritual practice. And they practice their practice. And they're faithful to their practice. And when they're faithful to their practice is faithful to them. It's a mantra. All people on a spiritual path have a spiritual practice. And they practice their practice. And they're faithful to their practice. And when they're faithful to their practice is faithful to them. It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. We could be vague. You've been to church, you've been to retreats, you've been to classes that talk about spirituality and meditation, and you've been informed and you have been inspired. And within a couple days you go, so what was that? Yeah, I know, we've all had that experience. All right, I spent 7 years in a monastery. I think I mentioned that. 7 years of silence, a lot of exposure to spirituality, a lot of exposure to teaching, a lot of time in meditation, a lot of time in spiritual direction. It didn't touch me. I read a lot. I'm very informed. It didn't touch me. All right? These 2 pages in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous are the most effective method of meditation that I have ever come across. People who dismiss the instructions of the big book do not understand the instructions. This is the most powerful explanation explanation of prayer and meditation that I have ever experienced, and it is the heart of my practice. So he says, when we retire at night, that kind of disturbs me. How do you start at night? I mean, I have a sense of order. I start in the morning, and then I tell you about my day, and then I tell you about my night. How come Bill starts at night? This is the way my mind works. I need to try to understand what Bill is trying to communicate to us. I believe he's trying to communicate something very specifically. It's very intentional that he starts at night, because he starts with an inventory to set us up for the next day. If you've read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that's one of his suggestions, that at night we think about the coming day and what our plans are going to be, and then we sleep on it. Bill asks a bunch of questions. Some of them are very similar to the questions of the 4th step and the 10th step. This is not a 10th step. This is the 11th step, meditation in the evening. Bill suggests 2 periods of meditation a day. One in the evening, in which we do an inventory to see where we fell short of our expectations. You notice that the word sin is not used in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill tried to distance himself from the Oxford group and from any form of organized religion. So there's no dogma, very little vocabulary that would come from organized religion or the Oxford group. The word sin is not in any of the instructions of the big book. The word sin comes from archery, to the best of my knowledge, and what it means in archery is missing the mark. Isn't that a better kind of sense of our human frailty? Oh, just missed the mark today. Just missed the mark today. I like it. I embrace it. But he also asks us some questions. So what did we do well? In the 12 and 12, he has a lot more of the asset evaluation than he does here, which I support, but not in 4-step inventory. What could we have done better? Were we kind and loving? Were we thinking of what we could do for others? These are all interesting reflections and good questions, and it doesn't have to take very long. But I believe the key question, the reason for the inventory at night is after making our review, we ask God's forgiveness. Anytime you see the words "we ask," that's code in the big book. It's code. It means pray. We ask God forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. I believe that single line is the reason for the evening's meditation, for the evening's review here. That inventory is, what can we do tomorrow to improve our humanity? What corrective measures are to be taken? But my most favorite part is on awakening. Let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking. That's a bunch. And I read it that way on purpose. I'm going to reread it. Please listen. And then I'm going to take it apart. On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking. When we meditate, look up the word in the dictionary. Meditation means directed thinking, reflective thinking, the use of our mind engaged in a thoughtful process. Now, many of you have been exposed to a different experience and maybe even a different definition of meditation. Emptiness, nothingness, no mind, releasing the mind, no thought. That's not meditation in the Western vocabulary. It was brought over by from Asia, from the East, by the Maharishis and the Yoganandis in the late 50s and early 60s, and they called it meditation. And they talked about releasing the mind, disengaging the mind, emptiness and nothingness, all right? The word that we use in our Western culture for that is contemplation. Okay? So that's another dimension of this relationship with power, is contemplation. I'm going to talk about all of these three things: prayer, meditation, contemplation. But I want to stay with, is it on? I want to stay with, no, is it on? Okay. Can't hear it. I want to stay with the Big Book's explanation of meditation. He says, we ask God to direct our thinking. It's a complex prayer. Pay attention. It's a very complex prayer. God, please direct my thinking. You got it. Not complex. Now here's where the rubber meets the road. God, please direct my thinking. Now I begin thinking, trusting that it's God inspired. That's why it's the 11th step. Because by the time we get to the 10th step, our mind has been restored to its proper use. Our mind has been restored to neutrality with regard to alcohol. Some of the dementia of steps 4 through 9 has been removed, and the kinks have been straightened out. And we are now able to think about God and others without it being all about ourselves, which is the world of self versus the world of the Spirit. We ask God to direct our thinking, then we begin thinking, and He has two directions. We think about the 24 hours ahead. And I literally, in my imagination, go through my day planner. What am I going to do today? Literally, what are my activities? This morning, when I did my 20 minutes of meditation, I thought about having breakfast, driving down here, getting the room set up, having lunch with my wife, getting a little rest, coming over here, doing this workshop, cleaning it up afterwards, going to another function later on this evening, being home around 9:30, 10 o'clock, and getting a good night's sleep. I thought about my day. Every activity that I thought about was in harmony with my perception of God's will for me today. Took 2 minutes. I reviewed my behavior. I reviewed my calendar. I reviewed my day planner. I reviewed my behavior, my activity. Then the next question. We consider our plans for the day. My interpretation, because there are two instructions, the first is about my behavior. The second is about my being. Who am I going to be today? And the word came to me today, be mindful, Herb. You're going to be around lots of people. Try to maintain some mindfulness rather than getting all excited and energetic and all distracted and dissipated. Try to stay centered on what your mission and what your purpose is today. Now, I didn't make that up. That's a word that was given to me as a gift of my meditation. What am I going to do today, and who am I going to be today? Now, it says, especially asked to be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, and self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. In thinking about our day, we face indecision. We ask God, code, pray for inspiration. Spiros is a Greek word for breath. Spiros, inspiration, the breath of God in us. Listen to the wee small voice. One of my favorite authors is Thomas Keating. He's a Trappist monk. He said, the language of God is silence. The language of God is silence. I was reading a Hindu prophet, mystic, and just recently, and he said, silence is never-ending speech. Silence is never-ending speech. The Big Bang, God spoke, and reality was created. silence is never-ending speech, the Logos made manifest, if that has any meaning to you at all. We ask God for inspiration, intuitive thought, or decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we're going to be inspired at all times. We may pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration, more and more on the plane of inspiration. Think about the flower blossoming over time. We cannot make a tulip grow by pulling on it. All people on a spiritual path have a spiritual practice, and they practice their practice. We usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom from self-will and are careful to make no request for ourselves, and there's more here. It talks about going to the rabbi and the minister and the priest, going to the library, and there's 5,000 years of books written about people's search for God, especially through meditation. As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful, connecting back again to the 10th step, and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, and we use the laser prayer. This is the prayer of all prayers. If you have no other prayer, this is the prayer. Thy will be done. I am using my will to align my will with God's will, my perception of God's will. And that'll be made clearer and clearer over time. Thy will be done. We alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in the simple way you have just outlined. We are undisciplined. I am powerless over my meditation. If you have my handout, and even if you don't, I have other handouts there with a description of my 11-step practice. And what I did was I outlined the material from the big book, and I created a specific practice with prayers and a protocol, sort of a liturgy of prayer and meditation. I had to do that. I'm a very structured person. And so I need to have structure. And I created this structure of my morning meditation, and it follows exactly what I just talked about. I'm not going to go over it. You can go over it. But it does talk in one section on contemplation. Let me just address that for just a minute, because the big book doesn't address that term other than tangentially. He talks about, in the 12th tradition, in thankful contemplation of him who presides over us all. He references the term, but he doesn't talk about it as a practice. My practice is very, very consonant with the triangle, where prayer is the action of my body when I'm speaking, meditation is the action of the mind when I'm thinking, and contemplation is the action of my will when I am loving. And I see contemplation in the true terms of the Eastern methodology: no thought, don't engage the mind, emptiness, quietness, and silence. I pray to get ready for my meditation. I meditate in order to get ready for my day, and I contemplate in order to be sitting in the presence of a loving power, to be absorbed by that power and to absorb that power. I sit in loving awareness, attempting to not be engaged in my thinking. A few minutes, probably 5 or 10 minutes, and probably 15 or 20 minutes. My practice is 20 to 30 minutes every morning, and 10 to 20 minutes in the evening. And so this is the way I've organized it and the way I explain it. Contemplation is not a thoughtful. I'm aware and awake and conscious, but I am not engaged in my mind. And when I find myself engaged in my mind, I use a sacred word. A sacred word as a symbol, acknowledging God's presence to me and the action of God in me, consenting to that action. God's present, I acknowledge, because God is always present. There is no place that there is not God. God is above me, behind me, within me, in front of me, on all sides. God is pressed up against me in an immaterial spiritual way at all times. All I need to do is acknowledge it and then consent to that activity in me. And the activity is the nature of God, at least as I understand it, as I want to understand it, as I choose and made a decision to understand it. My concept of God is love. My concept of love is an action. My concept of action is it's generative, creative, and it's always healing. But it requires my consent. It requires my thy will be done. Read the third step prayer slowly in meditation. God, I offer myself to you. Oh, really? Oh, really? To build with me and to do with me as thou wilt? Oh, really? I've become intimately acquainted with the third step prayer recently in the last 6 months with all the travail financially, etc. in the world today, which has impacted me. Assets reduced by about 40%. Whoa, that's uncomfortable when you're retired, all right? Third step prayer at 1:30 in the morning allows me to go back to sleep because I really mean it. I really mean it. God is. I've made that decision. I'm going to act as if it's true. That doesn't mean I get up and worry. It means I stay in bed and pray. And I go to sleep. That's not about where I do my contemplation. It's very difficult to do your contemplation prone, because prone means sleep to me. I'm just a good animal, all right? And so, yeah, and or just an animal anyway. And so, 1988, this is my experience. I went through these steps. I had a powerful spiritual awakening, a shift in my consciousness. I took responsibility for my life based on the 4th through the 9th step. I took full responsibility for my life. And I knew that my life depended on prayer and meditation. Bill Wilson in the 12 and 12 talks about prayer and meditation is as crucial to us as for the soul as air, water, sunshine, and food are for the body. How crucial is that? Air, water, sunshine, and food for the body? You'll die without it. He said meditation is that crucial for the soul. You will wither and die. We have a cancer of the soul. Prayer and meditation, radiation and chemotherapy, after the surgery of the 4th step, after the surgery of the 10th step, after the surgery of the 11th step inventory. Surgery, inventory and prayer. Bill Wilson in the 12 and 12 says they are absolutely intimately connected. We keep the channel clear and open to the sunlight of the Spirit. And so I knew my life depended on it. Not my sobriety. My life depended on it. Because if I lose my sobriety, I lose my life. And so I read the material that we just talked about. I outlined it in the way we just talked about it. I created a practice like we just talked about it. And I established a practice. Now, if on January 2nd you haven't been going to the gym, but as a New Year's resolution you make it a resolution to go to the gym, and you go and you spend 3 hours there, you won't go back on January 3rd. You'll be too tired to get out of bed, or too sore, all right? So it's not about, okay, I'm all inspired, I'm going to go home and meditate for an hour. No, wrong. Don't do that unless you have a practice. Most of us, when we begin, don't have a practice of regular prayer, let alone meditation. So I was instructed to do 1 minute. And when I was consistent with 1 minute, perhaps for a week, when I was consistent for 1 minute, then take it to 2 minutes. And then perhaps to go to 5 minutes. And then let the Spirit lead me. You don't make a tulip grow by pulling on it. Let the Spirit lead me to 5 minutes, to 10 minutes, and my goal was 15 minutes. Well, within a couple of months, I got to that 15 minutes. And I have a place in my house, and I have a cushion, and I have a timer, and I have little icons, and I have little reading material, and I have my practice, and I sit there and I finish my 15 minutes every day for a year. And every day for a year, at the end of that practice, I said, that was a waste of time. Because I had no theological thoughts, I had no sense of the presence of God, I had no particular spiritual feelings. And you see, I was misguided as to what was the expectation. But I'm very task-oriented, and I wanted some results. So after a year, I knew there was something wrong with that. And so I went to some people that I was connected to in the program and in formal religion, and none of them were very helpful. I wasn't hanging with people that knew much about meditation, I guess. But I had been on retreat with a man who is a very spiritual man. His name is Jim Finley, and he has written books about spirituality, and he's a clinical psychologist by practice, and he's a former Trappist monk by experience. His teacher was Thomas Merton for 7 years. Yeah, pretty powerful. And so I knew he knew, but he didn't know much about 12-step recovery. So I made an appointment with him for an hour, and I told him what the presenting problem was. He's a clinical psychologist. And I said, I'm a recovered alcoholic. I reviewed with him the experience that I'd had with the first step powerlessness and the balance of the process of having a spiritual awakening and my commitment to and my practice of meditation. All like I've just reviewed it with you, but I took 45 minutes to do it. And he said, okay, I got it, Herb. I got it. He says, you're a very task-oriented person, aren't you? Well, yeah, good, insight. He's intuitive, right? now. Yeah, right. And so then he said, well, here's what you've done. You've read the book, you've outlined it. You have a practice, you have a place, you have a pillow, and you are going to sit every day for 15 minutes, and you are going to become spiritual. He said the spiritual life doesn't work like that. He really got the first step, the reason that we commit to the balance of the steps and the journey and practice of meditation. He got it. He said, think this thought. You are as powerless over your spiritual life as you are over alcohol, having no power at all. He got it. He said, think this thought. You are as powerless over your meditation as you are over alcohol, having no power at all. Sit in the presence of power, acknowledging in all humility your powerlessness, and be humbled. He said, your job is to show up. The results are none of your business. Well, for a task-oriented person, that's a tremendous relief. I don't have to make it happen. I drop the cement coat of results. He said there are only 2 things you can do wrong in meditation. When you have a commitment to a practice of meditation, there are only 2 things that you can do wrong. 1 is not show up, and 2, leave early. Yeah. He said everything that happens in between is none of your business. Your job is the effort. The results are none of your business. That's so totally counterintuitive and countercultural, much like our program. What we know from our culture is that we need to know something, feel good about it, and then do it. What we know from a spiritual practice and from the book of Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever program you're in is that's not the right order. In fact, it's captured here on page 64. In the paragraph beginning on the resentment inventory, it said, from it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. 3 parts? 3 parts what I'm talking about, body, mind, and will. I don't make this stuff up, it comes out of here. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Culturally, we need to know and feel, and then we'll do. Spiritually, and in the program, it doesn't matter what you know and think. It doesn't matter how you feel. It does matter what you do. Acts contrary to our will. As I was leaving his office, many of you have probably watched Columbo in the days when Columbo was on. And he had this little technique that he would be walking out of a room, and then he would just turn around and he would lay the big one on him, right? Kind of like a big surprise. I'm walking out of this guy's room after this wonderful, wonderful piece of instruction and information, and he says, oh, by the way, Herb, if you want to know if your meditation's effective, ask your wife how you're treating her. Pay attention to how you drive on the freeway. Pay attention to how you interact with the service people in a restaurant. By your fruits, you will know them. If your meditation is effective, you will be changed. Hear my vocabulary. So, a golf cart, just to concretize this in a mental image. The purpose of a golf cart is to go around to those 18, I don't play golf, to those 18 holes and taking golfers around, but the golf cart is electric powered. In the evening, that golf cart is put in a shed and some cables are put on it to recharge the battery so that it can be of service the next day. When I'm in prayer and meditation, number 1, I say the set-aside prayer, then I say the 3rd step prayer, then I think about that image. I am sitting in the presence of power with the cables of power plugged into me so that I can be empowered to be of service this day. I don't have the power. I am not the power. But I can plug into the power, and I can be healed, and I can be empowered, and I can receive guidance for the day. The Oxford group, well, that was their whole theme, the predecessor group to Alcoholics Anonymous, was to sit and read and talk about Scripture and then to be quiet and listen for guidance. And they wrote down the guidance that they got for themselves. Where they got in trouble is they started getting guidance for other people. Susan, I got guidance for you. That doesn't work out so well. So it's about guidance. It's about creating my vision of God's will for me and then aligning my will with that vision. And when I'm out of line with that vision, I'll know it because I'll be disturbed, and I have a 4-part formula of prayer, discussion, amend, and service that will put me back on the beam, back on the track, back on the path, back in harmony with the spiritual principles of the universe. Start gently with prayer if you don't have a practice. If you want to practice, it will change your life. It cannot not change your life. Start gently, 1 minute of thoughtful prayer. Set aside prayer, 3rd step prayer, 7th step prayer, prayer of St. Francis, whatever you want. You don't have to finish it. Just for a minute, pray. In the 12 and 12, Bill Wilson has a totally different model in step 11 on meditation, a totally different model. As I mentioned earlier, I think he was influenced by a Jesuit priest, Father Ed Dowling, for 20 years. Father Ed Dowling was his spiritual director from 1940 to 1960. And the evidence of that Catholic Jesuit theology is very apparent in the 12 and 12, especially in this step 11, where he talks about taking the prayer of St. Francis and reading it one word, one phrase at a time, and then sitting with that word or phrase, asking the question, what does it mean? How does it apply to my life? What is my experience? And what is the guidance that I'm getting on this word or phrase? And when you've milked that word or phrase, go on to the next word or phrase and do the same until you finish your time or you finish the prayer. In the Catholic tradition, that's called Lectio Divina. It's a method of contemplation. It's a method of meditation and contemplation combined, where you're asking for the guidance of the Spirit to reveal to you the meaning of and the intent of a prayer as interpreted by the actions that are going to be asked of you for your life that day. Lectio Divina, Lectio comes from the Latin word to mean read. Divina is obvious, divine. Divine reading. You sit in prayer, and you can do that with the One Day at a Time book. You can do it with the big book, the 12 and 12. You can do it with any book that you're reading, all right? That is of spiritual nature, of course. All right. What I have said is that there's a natural flow then to the 12th step. The 12th step says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. I'm not paraphrasing, I'm quoting. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. I am emphasizing the. You hear the 12th step misread, having had a spiritual awakening as a result. It's not a result, it's the result of these 12 steps. What is a spiritual awakening? I mentioned a change in the way we think and feel and behave, and it's done to us, not by us, and it's a guarantee. We don't have to make it happen. It happens to us. We tried to carry this message to others, alcoholics, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Carry the message. What's the message? Now, that's a pretty straightforward question, but I get people startled like deer in headlights when I ask that question. Well, what's the message? Tried to carry the message. Having had a spiritual awakening, we tried to carry the message. Oh, maybe spiritual awakening as a requirement for freedom from alcohol. Carry this message. Now, St. Augustine, a 4th century Catholic bishop, who was literally talking about the Christian gospel, but we can translate it into something that makes sense for us. He said, wherever you are, preach the good news. Good news gospel. Wherever you are, preach the good news. If you have to, use words. Wherever you are, preach the good news. If you have to, use words. Arun Gandhi said, be the change that you want to affect. Same concept. We don't have to evangelize. We witness by our life. We witness by our behavior. Why do we go to meetings? Oh, lots of reasons. All right, I go to meetings for fellowship. Absolutely. The fellowship we crave, the book says. But I go to meetings for information and to be inspired. Absolutely. People's problems are horrendous, and they overcome them with the solutions that they find in Alcoholics Anonymous, especially through the steps, through prayer, through guidance, through sponsorship. I go to meetings. Well, now, Bill and Bob didn't have meetings to go to, did they, in June of 1935. They were members of the Oxford group, but the Oxford group didn't like alcoholics. That was a Christian fundamentalist group, wasn't it? And they went there to pray and meditate and have some fellowship and to work their 6 steps and to have a transforming and conversion experience. They all had that. That's terrific. But how do they help others, which was the 6th step of the Oxford group, to reach out and carry the message and to help other people? How did Bill and Bob help? They went to the asylum. That's where they found Jim, who put a little whiskey in his milk. They went to the hospital. That's where they found Fred, the accountant, who didn't know he was an alcoholic and ended up back in the hospital in a year, realizing the subtle insanity of the first drink. That's where they went to the hospital and they found Bill D., the 3rd alcoholic, the man on the bed. All right? Very proactive. Well, we can go, H&I's wonderful organization, and they take panels into hospitals and asylums and jails and recovery homes. Wonderful service. But how else can we be proactive and reach out to help another alcoholic or another suffering person with our brokenness if you're not in AA? Where do they hang out? In meetings. I took it into prayer and meditation one day when I was particularly disturbed by some malfunctioning of people in meetings. You ever experience that? You know, do people ever get under your skin and irritate you in meetings? Hello, maybe once in a while. And the words came to me, Herb, what do you expect? It's the emergency outpatient department of a mental hospital. You have the mentally ill and the walking wounded and the terminally ill in those meetings. What are you expecting? It is not the mecca of mental health. Oh yeah, I forgot. I forgot. Now I go to help. I go to meetings, not as an evangelist, but as a witness to recovery, just by my behavior, by my being there. I show up every week to 2 meetings that I have as my center post meetings. I go to other meetings, but not as regularly weekly as I go to these 2 meetings. They're both men's stag meeting for different reasons. All right? Tried to carry the message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. And of course, the next chapter 7 is a wonderful direction for sponsorship, working with others. Read it as a sponsor. Read it as a sponsee. Reflect on the directions in chapter 7. Read and highlight it. Find the directions. If you have the packet of material, you'll have a list of the directions that I found. There are 12 or so directions that I found, and it keeps changing as I reread and have different experiences. Carry the message to other alcoholics. Clearly, chapter 7, working with others. But chapter 8 is part of the 12th step. Practicing these principles in our relationship. The title is To the Wives. If it was written today, it would be To the Significant Others. Well, it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, because it's about your relationship. Chapter 8, practicing these principles. Chapter 9 is to the family afterwards, practicing these principles in your family. Chapter 10 is to the employers, practicing these principles when you go to work. And chapter 11, although it's named A Vision for You, when you read it, it's very clearly about the community of fellowship and the community of the non-fellowship. Practicing these principles in your neighborhood and in your church and in your fellowship. Practicing these principles in all our affairs. If you have the handout, I have a list of principles there. And in the other handouts too, I have a list of the 12 principles that describe both the name of the principle, the description of what that means, and the action required. I don't make that stuff up. I get it from lots of other people. It's sort of an amalgam of the reading I've done in other areas, and you might find it of value and interesting. Practice these principles in all our affairs. I've talked about the dynamic of the 12 steps. And it brings us to spiritual maturity. It really is a summary of it, of our way of life. I want to talk about sponsorship here for just a minute. So I'm going to back up a little bit. There we go. As I mentioned, I believe that sponsorship is the crucial area in recovery, the crucial area in spiritual path on our journey. Lots of times I'll ask people, do you have a sponsor? And they'll go, no, I don't. 25% of the people I talk to don't have a sponsor. And so we have a conversation about that. But the other 75%, about half of them say, oh, yes, I have a sponsor. And I'll say, well, when's the last time you talked to him? 2005. Well, that's not a sponsor, that's a fantasy. Yeah, exactly. A sponsor is a person who you've engaged on a life and death errand that is in fact going to be a person to whom you hold yourself fully accountable. It may be, if you're lucky, the person that you can work the steps with, if they have the experience of working the steps out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Not many do, as we've discussed it here. I have a sponsor who is my sponsor, and as I mentioned, will always be my sponsor because of his characteristics and the friendship and the relationship and the transparency that we have. I hold myself accountable to him. If you need help additional to that in step work, get a step guide. It's a temporary relationship. It's like a case manager for a while, you know? Yeah. But the word sponsor is not used in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Not in the Roman numerals, nor in the Arabic numbers. Now, of course, it is in the stories, because the stories were written after several years of recovery. But in the big book, published in 1939, the word sponsor isn't used. Did I read the italics on page 18? Not yet. Okay. I've had 3 workshops, and it's a mush right now, so I'm not sure. On page 18, it comes the closest to identifying what a sponsor is. In italics, the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. My sponsor had me read that and in our first year of recovery, and he said, Herb, you're not eligible to be a sponsor until you've done your 4th and 5th step, because you are not properly armed with facts about yourself. That's how he interpreted, that's how I interpreted that paragraph. Once I've done my 5th step, I'm eligible to be a sponsor, meaning guide people through the steps. There are other ways of sponsoring, of course, taking people to meetings and being a sounding board for them, as long as you're not trying to, in fact, be a counselor or any other kind of a therapeutic relationship. I am not responsible for anybody's recovery. I am also not responsible for their relapse. It's very important to be engaged with your sponsee, but not to be enmeshed with them. I am not invested in my sponsee's recovery. I am not invested. I am passionate about it. And I tell them, I will work as hard as you do, but I won't work any harder. I won't chase you. You want it, you come get it. If you stop calling me, I will not call you. I might call you after a month I don't hear from you. Once. Just to break the silence and make it easier for you to begin again. My suggestions to my people, and everybody is different. Everybody is different in terms of the way they approach sponsorship based on their experience, their exposure, their understanding of the process, the group and the structure and all the rest of that. Everybody and their own personalities differ, all right? I suggest to my people they call me once a week. Some do. Some don't. I suggest that we meet once a month, face to face. Breakfast, coffee, lunch, dinner, something. Some do, some don't. And here's how it works with me. As your sponsor, I make suggestions. If you take my suggestions, there will be consequences. If you don't take my suggestions, there will be consequences. Choose your consequences. See, I don't punish and I don't reward. I don't hire and I don't fire. If somebody comes to me, we'll have a conversation about the appropriateness of my working with them, and sometimes it's not appropriate for different reasons. And I've never fired anybody. They fire themselves. When they don't do what I suggest, eventually they go away. Yeah, they stop calling, they stop seeing me, they stop doing the steps, they stop going to the meetings I go to. They fire themselves. It's not my job. Bill Wilson said there are only 2 disciplines in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, he was referring to the traditions, but I'm extrapolating that and putting it here. There are only 2 disciplines in sponsorship. One is God and one is alcohol. You're either going for one or you're going for the other. You see, there's no resting spot in between. One of my people in my workshop said that there's a spring, a very heavy spring on the dimmer switch, and it's usually inclined to go down unless we stay gently pressed, pushing up against it so that it moves imperceptibly forward. If we relax a little bit, that dimmer switch begins to move back almost automatically, and the lights get dimmer automatically, and we don't know that it's getting dimmer until it gets dark and we're back in our behavior or our substance. Sponsorship is one of accountability, transparency. My sponsor said, I want you to be transparent with me. I had no idea what he was talking about. So I said, well, what do you mean by transparency? He says, I want your insides and your outsides to match. Wow, yeah. I want your insides and your outsides to match. Now, it's taken time, and it took the work, many sessions going through the steps, and a constant vigilance with regard to prayer and meditation, and the 10th step. And 25 years sober, I still talk to my sponsor 3 times a week. And I hold myself accountable. I tell him what I'm thinking and feeling and doing. And we see he lives in St. Louis now, but we see each other probably 4 times a year. He has a place out here. And then it has the description, a job description of sponsorship on page 18 over on 19. That the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty. He's an alcoholic. That he obviously knows what he is talking about. He's had an experience with the steps and with the book. That his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect. His deportment shouts. Use words if you have to. That he is a man with a real answer. He has had a spiritual awakening. That he has no attitude of holier than thou. Nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful. There's the key to sponsorship. Helpful. Now the Al-Anons can help you determine between helpfulness and enabling. It's a fine line, and we're not equipped necessarily to make out. So do I loan the money or don't I? Do I help find a job or don't I? Do I take him to a meeting or don't I? Do I have him in my home or don't I? Bill Wilson in chapter 7 says all of those things are appropriate unless they're not. Yeah, you kind of like have to figure it out. Exactly. That's where other people's experience comes in incredibly helpful. I have a book. Oh, I forgot to put it out. It's from Hazel. There's a guide. You're welcome to take the pamphlet from Central Office, General Service Office on sponsorship. I have it. I forgot to put it out, but I'll put it out now. You're welcome to take that. If you want to make a donation, that's fine. If you don't, it's fine. But I do also have a book from Hazelton. It's a 200-page book on sponsorship. I've read it. I've reread it. It's excellent. It tells you how to be a sponsor. It tells you how to be a sponsee. It's a wonderful balance. And he's got lots of ingredients, and you can well imagine what they are. And I have a whole workshop that I've done on it, and you're welcome to ask for that. I have a flyer there on the workshops that I've done. I have done 10 different workshops on meditation, forgiveness, and etc. And you're welcome to look at that and email me and let me know what you would like. But the one on sponsorship came out of the reading this book from Hazelton, and the one ingredient he has that I just loved, other than the ones I've already mentioned, which are vital, the one I really loved is that the person is enjoying their sobriety. Isn't that perfect? Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want. I want somebody who has found the truth and is reveling in the truth, has found freedom and is living free, and has a compassionate sense of service. You see, all 5 traditions, and I've mentioned them, Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all 5 of them, if you boil them down and you take out the vocabulary, you take out the nomenclature, you take out the dogma, you take out the liturgy, you take out the cultural inflections, and you boil it right down, distilled spirituality, it has the 2 commandments that Jesus addressed the Pharisee with. The Pharisee said from the Old Testament, from the Hebrew tradition, from the Hebrew scripture, love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus says, you're right, absolutely. But I bring a New Testament. Love God with all your mind, with all your heart, with all your strength. Love your neighbor as God loves you. Up the ante just a little bit and made it a lot more palatable. Because I can't love you necessarily as I love myself, because sometimes I don't love myself. But I can attempt to love you as God loves you. And God will make that happen if I do what we've just been talking about. If I sit in the presence of power, allowing power to have its way with me. If I do these steps and allow these steps to have their way with me. If I go out into the community and I have an attitude of service, of helpfulness, of compassion. The Buddhists have it, wisdom and compassion, meditation and service, compassion. I love the word. Means to do it with energy, to do it with love, to do it with concern, to be helpful. There's the one word, the key word, to be helpful. What I'd like to do is read a poem that I believe summarizes everything that we've been talking about. And it's not from our tradition. It's from a Chinese tradition. You don't need to look at it, but it's a meditation. And I would encourage you to just sit here with it and allow it to wash over you. And hear the principles of our program, hear the principles of spirituality, hear the process, and hear the promise. The garden grew still. Oh, better start at the beginning. Once upon a time, in the heart of the Western Kingdom, lay a beautiful garden, and there in the cool of the day was the master of the garden wont to walk. Of all the denizens of the garden, the most beautiful and most beloved was a gracious and noble bamboo. Year after year, bamboo grew yet more noble and gracious, conscious of his master's love and watchful delight, but modest and gentle withal. And often, when wind came to revel in the garden, bamboo would cast aside his grave stateliness to dance and play right merrily, tossing and swaying and leaping and bowing in joyous abandon, leading the great dance of the garden which most delighted the master's heart. Now upon a day, the master himself drew near to contemplate his bamboo with eyes of curious expectancy. And bamboo, in a passion of adoration, bowed his great head to the ground. In loving greeting the master spoke, "Bamboo, bamboo, I would use thee." Bamboo flung his head to the sky in utter delight. The day of days had come, the day for which he had been made, the day for which he had been growing hour by hour, the day in which he would find his completion and his destiny. His voice came low, "Master, I am ready. Use me as thou wilt. Bamboo, the master's voice grew grave. I would fain take thee and cut thee down. A trembling of a great horror shook Bamboo. Cut me down? Me, whom thou, master, hast made the most beautiful in all thy garden? To cut me down? Ah, not that, not that. Use me for thy joy, O master, but cut me not down. Bamboo, bamboo, the master's voice grew graver still. If I cut thee not down, I cannot use thee. The garden grew still. Wind held his breath. Bamboo slowly bent his proud and glorious head. There came a whisper, Master, if thou canst not use me, but thou cut me down, then do thy will and cut. Bamboo, beloved bamboo, I would cut thy leaves and branches from thee also. Master, master, spare me, cut me not down, cut me down, and lay my beauty in the dust. But wouldst thou take from me my leaves and branches also? Bamboo, alas, if I cut them not away, I cannot use thee. The sun hid his face. A listening butterfly glided fearfully away, and Bamboo shivered in terrible expectancy, whispering low, Master, cut away. Bamboo, bamboo, I would yet cleave thee in twain and cut out thine heart, for if I cut not so, I cannot use thee. Then was Bamboo bowed to the ground. Master, master, then cut and cleave. So did the master of the garden take Bamboo and cut him down, and hack off his branches, and strip off his leaves, and cleave him in twain, and cut out his heart. And lifting him gently, carried him to where was a spring of fresh sparkling water in the midst of his dry fields. Then putting one end of broken bamboo in the spring, and the other into the water channel in his field, the master laid down gently his beloved bamboo. And the spring sang welcome, and the clear sparkling waters raced joyously down the channel of Bamboo's torn body into the waiting fields. Then the rice was planted, and the days went by, and the shoots grew, and the harvest came. On that day was Bamboo, once so glorious in his stately beauty, yet more glorious in his brokenness and humility. For in his beauty he was life abundant, but in his brokenness he became a channel of abundant life to his master's world. Bill Wilson in 1940 met Father Ed Dowling. It was late at night. It was November. It was a sleeting, cold, miserable night. Bill was upstairs of a club. That's where he lived, because they had had their house foreclosed on. He and Lois lived on top of the club in a very small quarters. And Lois was out that night, and Father Dowling came to visit. And Bill Wilson greeted him, and once he saw the Roman collar, relaxed, and they became instant friends. And after a time, Bill Wilson gave him his fifth step that very night and engaged him as his spiritual director for the next 20 years. Ed Dowling, when he left that night, he looked Bill directly in the eye and he said, Bill, you have been given a unique gift. You have been given a unique destiny. You have been given a destiny as special and as unique as your own fingerprint. If you do not live your destiny, this gift will never appear in the world again. Bill heard it. This was his call to ministry. Each one of us, because of our history, our family of origin, our religious background, our non-religious background, our experience of brokenness, our experience of recovery, we have a destiny as unique as our fingerprint. And if in fact You don't live your destiny. The gift that you have will never appear again in this world. The 12th step is an invitation to have a spiritual awakening, to live awake, and to witness to those around you that it's possible. You can find freedom, and you can find a relationship with a power other than yourself. You can be taken to a place you don't even know exists. And all you have to do is be willing to be taken. I would invite you to pray the prayer of St. Francis. You won't need it. I'm going to invite you to do it antiphonally, meaning I will pray a phrase and you will repeat it. I will pray the next phrase and you will repeat it. Much like the monks do in the choir loft. On the left bank they start the prayer, on the right bank they respond, and back and forth, and that's what we'll do. I'll lead you. You can close your eyes. Pay attention to the words. They're the words of St. Francis. They're the words of transformation. They're the words of turning. They are the words of being turned. Pay attention. This is our invitation. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather than to comfort, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted. To understand than to be understood. To love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Our way of life is summarized in the book. Trust God, clean house, serve others. That's 12-step spirituality. Thank you very much.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. If that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.